and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Unit 1 of AP English Language and Composition, titled Rhetoric and the Rhetorical Situation. So, Unit 1 is on the rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. This is the second of the three essays on the AP exam as well. And we're going to be going through, very simply, what Unit 1 is. College Board also has videos very similar to this to help you through AP language. However, I feel like those videos sometimes are over the top. They do a lot of examples. I wanted to go more into the teaching aspect of it. So I hope this type of thing can be helpful. I'm not that much older than any student who's taking AP language at this point. So hopefully I can add some new insight and help you through AP Lang. So as I said, AP Lang is on rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. Welcome to How to AP Lang. So what is rhetoric? So rhetoric is the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing, especially the use of figures of speech and other compositional techniques. So that is literally just copied and pasted from Google. That's the very simple thing, but I kind of dumbed it down to language being used to persuade others. And you'll see this a lot in writing. You'll see things like, again, this can be very simply like metaphors, similes, things like that. That's what I'll say in the younger level, they'll probably define rhetoric as. However, rhetoric, I'd say more so in AP language, with the fact that AP language is all about nonfiction, all about persuasive arguments, at least a good chunk of the courses. Rhetoric is all about how you can make your point arguable and how it can change the opinion of someone else. And that's a very important thing with AP Lang because one of your essays is going to be an argumentative essay. So it definitely helps when you're thinking of rhetoric, and especially for the rhetorical essay, for you to be able to examine how different essays, how different speeches use rhetoric, use different skills to help persuade their audiences. Because it's not just arguing a point. Anyone can say, I believe ice cream is better than pizza or something. It's how they arguing it and what they do to get to that point. And that's what a lot of this first unit is really about. The power of words is also how rhetoric can be defined. This is how College Board really tries to dumb it down. I feel like this is a little bit too dumbed down though, because I think it is more than just the power of words. It's how the words are put together and defined to make an argument. So understanding rhetoric. So there are 6 stages to understanding rhetoric. This is how College Board is going to define it, and this is, I think, the easiest way to do so. So I'm actually going to just show all 6 pieces now, and I'm going to go through each one. The first is exigence. This is the term the AP is going to use. I feel like this is the one word, though, that most students might not know, so I changed it to demand because it's pretty much the same thing. And exigence is pretty much asking what situation caused the piece to be written. So I'm saying for these 6, I'm terming it as what caused something to be written. Sometimes it'll be what caused this speech to be spoken or something like that. I chose to do written because I didn't want to do all the dashes and stuff. But the exigence is rather simple. What caused this piece to be written? So the example I'm going to be using today is why I believe pizza is better than pasta, for example. So the exigence could be, let's say a new pasta place to open in my town. Would have to argue why I believe pizza is better. So purpose, why is the piece being written? This one's rather obvious. Why is it being written? So for example, for my example, it could be like, I believe pizza is better than pasta, and I want to prove that point. I'm starting to realize that's not a great example because pizza and pasta will be at the same restaurant, but whatever. Audience, who was this piece being written for? This is the same thing. Who was this speech being spoken to? Um, who is this trying to? What minds is this trying to change? Who are they trying to? Whose argument are they trying to persuade? Context, another very simple one. The circumstances surrounding the situation. That I kind of mentioned the first one. And context and exigence are rather similar. Context is like what caused it. Like, for example, the restaurant opening, I'd say is the context. The exigence is now people are going to pasta more. That's the difference. I'd say context is what causes is the start of the situation. Exigence is what causing the piece. That's the big difference. Context is the situation. It's the setting. Writer, who's writing the piece, that's rather obvious. And message, what the writer wants the audience to take away from the piece. Another very simple one for this example would be pizza is better than pasta. That's obviously a very basic example of what rhetoric is. However, this is a very simple way of understanding how to use and understand rhetoric. So soapstone's another thing that the AP also, or College Board, has as a thing to help you remember it. Subject, occasion, audience, purpose, speaker, and tone. It's very similar to what I just did. Subject is going to be the thing for subjects probably actually be context, and occasion will be exigence. I personally don't like soapstone because very simply I don't get why they made it into this weird acronym. If it helps you, great. Um, for me, at least, this isn't very helpful. I think the other way is easier. I don't have an acronym for the other way, but I think soapstone isn't very helpful, but I wanted to throw it in case it is. So how writers connects with audience. This is now more 1.2, but there are three ways: ethos, logos, and pathos. So these are terms I'm guessing most people by AP language level, which is normally 11th or 12th grade, have probably heard before. Ethos or ethics is the shared beliefs and values. And what I should really say first is ethos, logos, and pathos are three Greek words, and they help. And the idea of these three terms is that they're put into writing to help influence others. So they use these three strategies to help influence the audience. So ethos, or using ethics, is to help change them using shared beliefs and values. So, like, what does the writer and the audience probably agree on that they can put in the essay to help change their argument? They're using ethics to help change it. Logos is logic and reasoning, and this is also logic. Like, what type of logical argument could you put in your essay to help change someone's mind? And pathos, or emotion, is using emotions to help change people. How can you make your essay provoke emotion in someone so that they change their mind? We see this a lot in writing, we see this a lot in speeches, we see this a lot in politics. We see how they would use ethos, how ethics, what their morals are to help change their arguments. Logos, how are they using logic to change their arguments? Pathos, using emotions to influence other people. It's a rather simple idea. However, it's something all writing uses. All the writing in AP language is most likely going to use this type of strategy, at least most good writing in AP language. So, especially on the rhetorical essay. So I suggest that you get these three ideas nailed down if you don't have it already, because they're rather simple. However, if you can point them out in pieces, you're going to find that really simple. The last thing is Aristotle's triangle. This is something that the AP also does teach sometimes. This is a more advanced one, but this is just how this is a visual way to show how a good writer will conduct an argument. So you'll see the message is in the middle. I have like my mouse here. I don't know if you can see it, but here is the orange in the middle, that's the message, and it's using logos, pathos, and ethos to construct the argument. And then even on the outside of it, what is ethos built of? Trust, allure, and credibility. What is pathos built of? Values, bonds, and emotions. What is logos built of? Proof, logic, and reasoning. So that's the idea of the triangle. What constructs the message? What constructs the argument? It's logos, pathos, and ethos, and what breaks that down. So this is a more visual example of the point I just was making before. So if the more like the writing of it wasn't very helpful, this hopefully this image should, because I think this image is actually very helpful. Some of the ones that I found of the Aristotle triangle are not as helpful because they don't go into logos, pathos, and ethos, which I think is the more important part of Aristotle's triangle rather than just saying speaker, tone, audience. I think that's one of the ones I see, or purpose, writer. I've seen a lot of weird things. I think this is the best one, and I think this is a very good one to keep in mind, have in your notebook, whatever. So um, that's all of the learning for Unit One. Unit One's actually rather short. There is also a second little bit of Unit One, which is about like arguments and citing evidence. I'm not going to go much into that right now, very simply because I think that's more a skill that you're going to just need to know for the AP. But that's not something you really teach. That I think that's something most kids are going to go into the AP already knowing. And I don't like the way that College Board does it, and I don't think it's actually very helpful for the exam. So I'm not even going to go into that right now. I might go into another video if you really need to. I don't even remember what College Board calls it, but that's how like I don't even remember it that much. But so we're going to just go into an AP question. This is an AP question on, I don't know what your AP exam or anything, but here's a good AP question. I took it. So this is the passage below is a draft. You can pause the video quickly and read through this, and then there's going to be 3 AP questions after to go through how we can apply rhetoric. The AP exam or College Board does very similar things to this, where they like do it, except they just use a reading, not really questions. So I'm going to stop talking for like 5 seconds, read through this, pause the video because it's going to take more than 5 seconds to read, and then we'll get to questions. Okay, so I'm hoping you all read it. If not, just pause it, and we're going to move on to the AP questions now. So, as you most likely have read, this piece is about building another artificial land island off the coast of Hong Kong to help spread out people, but there's good and bad arguments. So, question one is the writing is considering adding this following sentence after sentence six. These inhabitants should leave their homes because they have been destroyed or otherwise rendered uninhabitable from flooding. Should the writer add this sentence after sentence six? So, these inhabitants should leave their homes because they have been destroyed or otherwise rendered uninhabitable from the flooding. Let's read sentence six now. Because of rising sea levels, some inhabitants have already had to abandon their homes. And then this is seven. New islands will have to be built to ensure a safe future for its citizens because science indicates that Kiribati will go underwater within a century. And it's saying in between we should add these inhabitants should leave their homes because of flooding because they have been destroyed or otherwise rendered uninhabitable from flooding. So should the writer add this sentence? A, yes, because it describes the writer's exigence from the passage. B, yes, because it defines a potentially unfamiliar term used in sentence six. C, no, because it fails to clarify the writer's purpose in creating the text. Or D, no, because it makes an ineffective claim that does not require a defense. So I'm going to give you like 5 seconds to answer on your own, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so let's just go through all of the choices. A, because it describes the writer's exigence for writing the passage. This is not true. I'm going to just say that one's not true because exigence is what the demand, what caused what caused this passage to be written, and it's not about that. B, because there's a potentially unfamiliar term used in sentence six. There's no potential unfamiliar term in sentence six, so it can't be either of the yeses. Plus, I think you can just use common sense. This sentence wouldn't fit very well in between sentence six and seven, so you can really move on to question to answer C or D. So C because it fails to clarify the writer's purpose. I think this one's a decent answer because it does kind of fail to address the claim. However, I do believe D is going to be a better answer, and that is the correct answer. And that's because it makes an ineffective claim that does not require defense. And very simply, even though this is more of a statement, but it's not benefiting what was being discussed in that paragraph. In that paragraph, it was discussing some of the negatives of what is happening in other places, but it's not benefiting an argument. It's not helping any defense. So this is why I think, which is why D is the correct answer. And you can also very simply, even if you don't, even you can just use like common logic. A and B can't be it because you can just realize it's not yes by putting it into the piece, and then it's not C because C is more challenging. Deciding between C or D is more challenging, but that's just using what we went through before with the build the six pieces of rhetoric. The next question. In sentence 7, reproduced below, the writer wants to add the phrase according to the countries present to the beginning of the sentence, adjusting the capitalization as needed. So the new sentence then would be according to the country's president, new islands will have to be built to ensure a safe future for its citizens because science indicates that Kiribati will go underwater within a century. Should the writer make this addition? So I'll give you 5 seconds to. Actually, no, let me read the answer first. A, yes, because it acknowledges the source of the information conveyed in the sentence. B, yes, because it provides an additional perspective to set up a counter argument. C, no, because it introduces new evidence that requires an adjustment to the paragraph's line of reasoning. Or D, no, because it fails to consider the rhetorical situation set up in the first paragraph. So I'll give like 5 seconds to answer it. So, should the writer make this addition? So, very similar to the last one, you place the intro into the sentence and you see if it fits. And very simply, you can use common logic and say it does fit. And this, in my opinion, is a rather simple question, but I'm going to go through all the answers anyway. Yes, because it acknowledges the source of information conveyed in the sentence. This is going to be the correct answer. This is a very good answer because adding according to the country's president, it's making it from a statement or a belief to a fact stated by someone who's a very reliable source. So it does set up your argument a lot better. Yes, because it provides additional perspective to set up a counter argument. Even though this is a good point, that's not benefiting the overall essay, because the entire point is to prove your point, not to give other people an example of a counter argument. So even though B is a true statement, it's not a good answer. C and D are both no's, but let's go through them anyway because it introduces new evidence. That's not true. There's no new evidence. And no, because it fails to consider the rhetorical situation, which is not true either. So A is going to be the correct answer here. But again, you can just eliminate the no's because it fits very well into the sentence and you can use kind of logic with that. And then you just go between A and B is just not a logical explanation because you wouldn't want to set up a counter argument in your argumentative essay. Unless you were addressing it, obviously, unless you were like downplaying it. Finally, our last question, the writer wants to provide relevant support for the claim made in sentences 12 and 13. Which of the following sentences, if added after sentence 13, would most effectively accomplish this goal? So let's read sentences 12 and 13. So 12, so is building artificial islands a good solution for modern day challenges? 13, not everyone thinks so. And we're looking to add a sentence after 13. So the 12 is a question, is it a good solution? 13 is not everyone thinks so. So what should be added after 13 will most likely be something that's saying why someone will believe it's not always a great idea, why someone would say it's not a good idea. So let's look. A, according to the Australian Bureau of Meteorology's National Tidal Center, there has been an average sea level rise of 7.3 millimeters a year around low-lying islands like Kiribati in the past few decades. So I don't think this is very helpful because even though this is true, we don't know how low lying it is. It's not such a great answer, but let's keep it on the table. B, a professor of biology at Old Dominion University, Ken Carpenter, notes that poaching of giant clams does more damage to marine ecosystems than island building does. This is also not a great answer because this is nothing. This would be, because again, it's saying not everyone thinks so. It's saying, so we're looking for a negative response, not a positive. This will be more of a positive response saying, oh, poaching of giant clams is worse than island building. So let's get rid of that one. C, marine biologists contend that urban sprawl spreading into oceans inevitably causes havoc for marine organisms and their habitats. This is a very good answer, so let's keep it on the table because it's a negative response to marine organisms. And D, the government in South Korea expected to have 300,000 residents in a utopian smart city built on the artificial island of Songdo. This is more of a positive thing again, so let's get rid of D. So we're between A and C at this point. And again, I said A is not great because even though it's saying it's a level rising about 7.3 millimeters a year around low-lying islands, it's not a great answer because they could build it higher than Kiribati, and it's not a great answer because we don't know, because that's a negative argument for the island, and it's something that can be fixed. C is a lot better of an answer. A is not a terrible answer, but again, it says most effectively. C is a lot more effective because it's saying marine biologists contend that the urban sprawl spreading into oceans inevitably causes havoc for marine organisms and their habitats. That's a lot better of an answer, so the answer is going to be C. So that's all of Unit 1 of AP Language and Composition with How to AP Lang. So I hope this was very helpful in understanding AP Language Unit 1. Hopefully I'm going to make more videos. I don't know. I want to see how this does, but want to try it out. I hope this was helpful. So I hope you guys do well with Unit 1 of AP Language and see you in the next one.